Hello everyone, Kenton Cavescu from the RocketBlocks team here. In this mock interview video, we're sitting down with Alan Yang, who is currently the head of product management at Bubble, which is a popular no-code development tool. Before that, he was a product manager at Google, where he focused on their productivity apps, including Docs, Sheets, and Slides. In today's mock interview video, we're going to sit down and ask Alan the classic product management interview question: what is your favorite product and why? So let's go ahead and take a look at how he answers this.
Is tell me a little bit about your favorite product. Why is it your favorite product? And one or two improvements that you would go ahead and make to that particular product if you could.
Yeah, sure. So I would love to talk about Venmo.
Okay.
I mentioned Venmo because I think it is just a really elegantly designed solution to a particular particular problem. Um, so the use case for Venmo is really like transferring, I would say, like smaller or more like day to day amounts of money
Hmm.
between people. This is kind of distinct from the use case of like transferring larger amounts or like paying larger bills. So like for that, you have like wires and like auto pay from your bank account, things like that.
Yeah.
But the use case Venmo is trying to tackle is really like day to day you're interacting with people, and maybe you're like splitting a meal, maybe you have a roommate and you need to split expenses with them. Um, and Venmo tackles that particular use case pretty well. So if we think about like the target user of this, it's definitely not kind of like an enterprise B2B kind of a product. It's really for people who might be engaging with other peers on a more frequent basis. So I would guess that their user base possibly skews a little bit younger.
Hmm.
So for example, college students are like constantly interacting with peers, probably splitting costs, things like that. It's I would even maybe go a step further on the filtering and say like this is not really even a tool that you would necessarily use with like your partner or your spouse, right? Because like those folks probably have like joint bank accounts or something like that. So yeah, it's really for folks who are like interacting with friends or peers in those kinds of situations. And you would use it when you need to, again, like split some kind of cost, so like a meal, or maybe you need to pay somebody back because you're in some kind of like a called like a roommate kind of relationship with
Okay.
them. So that's the target use case. And again, the reason I chose Venmo is that the product just seems to fulfill that use case like very well. And I
Mm.
appreciate like the simple design. I don't mean simple in a pejorative way, but they just like fulfill it very well. So at its core, you can transfer money digitally from one person on Venmo to another person. You can connect Venmo to a bank account so that you are able to easily like sweep money from your Venmo balance into your bank account. If you don't have enough money to pay somebody on Venmo, it'll automatically withdraw it from your bank.
Mm.
It's all pretty seamless, and they make the UI pretty clear about like where the money is coming from, where the money is going, things like that. You can find people pretty easily. You have the choice of username, I think even phone number. I think even now they have like this little QR code so that if you happen to be in person, you can kind of like scan the other person's QR code.
Yep.
So it's great, even for situations where like you're not physically with the person, of course. Um, and yeah, it does exactly what you need. It literally just transfers the money from one person to another. Um, yeah, they obviously have like other features. I will say that the social side of Venmo is not something that I think is really core, would be my guess. I'm not fully sure what the thinking was behind it. I think it's been there for a while, because having like a social feed of publicly visible payments is not something that I would have thought is necessarily super tied to the core use case. But I know that they used to run some kind of a referral campaign where you know you get $1 if you refer a friend or something like that, and like
Yep.
if you publicly post that on a feed, that can kind of build a little bit of buzz. Yeah, so those are all things I guess I liked about it. And you also asked for one improvement, I think.
Yep.
Um, Thinking about some of the use cases I mentioned, there are sort of like the one-off payment use cases, like splitting a meal at a restaurant. But I think Venmo is also being used by a lot of folks in the target demographic to split recurring expenses.
Mm,
So I would, uh, if I were working on Venmo, I would perhaps think about looking into that idea. Like, how can you better facilitate recurring transfers
mm.
from one person to another?
And what's an example of like the type of recurring transfers you would think of that are an example of sort of these a recurring transfer that would happen in a casual non-business relationship?
Yeah, so like roommate splitting rent is kind of the
Hmm.
big example in my head, or like any other kind of like apartment related recurring, expense that's the same amount every month. Um, you would, if you think about the user experience, you would probably want to do things like, show somebody a warning a couple days before a recurring expense is about to pop. Um, Maybe you have an option of like adjusting the amount on
Hmm.
a one-off or something like that. Um, I don't think it's like the next frontier of payments, but I think it's a potentially like a very utilitarian feature that kind of like ties well with some of the use cases for Venmo.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, I could definitely see that making sense. I remember the pain of just sort of constantly writing out a check to my friend who was like paying the sort of rent on behalf of me and roommates for
Hmm.
years. So I know that well. Just a few quick follow up questions
Hmm.
on some of the elements you mentioned. So I think at the beginning you sort of said Venmo is quite sort of elegant at what it does, and
Hmm.
I'm curious if you think about PayPal as sort of one alternate option, Square Cash as another alternate option.
Hmm.
Um, what is it about Venmo for you that's sort of special, or sort of beats it out in your mind that you would go with Venmo versus some of those other options?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think at least today, I believe you're right that those other products have basically the same feature set where you can accomplish the same goal. Um, I'm going to guess that the UI and UX for Venmo does seem a little bit, I'll say, like smoother or more modern, or maybe like more mobile first
Yep.
compared to PayPal. At least that's I have had some experience with PayPal. Um, I would bet that makes a little bit of difference, but might not explain like the market shares necessarily. I would honestly bet that the difference in popularity might be just like their histories and how they went to market. Like it feels like Venmo pursued kind of a mobile first strategy and went after a particular like age range of users, like especially in the
Yeah.
college sort of demographic. And that's great because like that is a market where you can spread a little bit more virally because you have all these college students who are like, oh, do you have Venmo? Do you have Venmo? Whereas like PayPal, I think began almost more in like an eBay kind of context, or maybe like one person paying a business kind of a context. And Square also kind of there's some kind of like B2B or B to small business kind of route there.
Yep.
So I don't know the history too well, but yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I think your insight around go to market probably explains a lot of that difference. Like I remember uh, seeing sort of Venmo as it came out, and my default application to solve that use case before that had been PayPal.
Mm,
And Venmo, I think their big pitch at the time was two things that I recall at least. One was it's designed for mobile first, and especially at that time, the Venmo mobile experience was much better than PayPal on mobile.
mm,
I think PayPal's caught up. I actually never used PayPal on my phone, so I'm not really sure. And I think
yeah.
Square Cash, from like a mobile perspective, like my sense is that UI is pretty nice.
Mm,
So I think that was one thing was they just came out with mobile first at a time where PayPal was caught flat-footed on that. So I
mhm,
agree with you there. And then I think that social feed thing as well. You alluded to this earlier. May have created buzz and appealed to a younger demographic, or at the very least, sort of just created buzz around it. Like, oh hey, like I just connected my account and realized like I've got a bunch of friends using it too.
mm,
And so maybe everyone's on here, and I think that probably helped a lot. Cool.
cool.
Okay.